overnight, Israel carried out a number of airstrikes in the Gaza Strip, killing over 330 people, according to Hamas, who run the health ministry. It's the biggest wave of airstrikes following the ceasefire, which had been in effect since the 19th of January. Israel said it's going to act against Hamas with increasing military strength, and it seems they have the explicit support of the US insofar as they contacted them this for prior approval. Jason joins us on the line. What's gone wrong here that the ceasefire didn't hold, Jason?
Well, the basic reason is that there was never any trust between either the parties involved in the ceasefire and that they have diametrically opposite aims still, even after what is now 18 months of conflict. And that meant that the ceasefire was always going to be very difficult to uphold. That was known when it was agreed in January. And sadly, that is exactly what's happened. There's been increasing violence in terms of Israeli airstrikes for a week or so now, but it seems that the Israeli government have now decided that they're going to go all out for the strikes and a new offensive that we're seeing about today.
What's the story with the remaining hostages? How many are held? How many Palestinian prisoners are held? And you know, you would think that Israel had some incentive to keep those remaining hostages alive.
Oh, Israel has every incentive to keep those hostages alive and to bring them back to Israel. And there are very extensive and heated debates within Israel of how to do that. The argument of the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is that only military force can force Hamas to make the concessions necessary to bring those hostages back. There are 59 of them now, of whom we think about half are still, less than half are still alive. There is obviously another argument, which is that a ceasefire deal now is the best way to bring those hostages back. And that's ongoing as we speak within Israel. The main issue, though, is not so much what's happening on the streets, but what's happening within the government. And Benjamin Netanyahu has a number of reasons to decide that he doesn't want to progress to a second phase of the ceasefire agreement that was involved in January, even if Hamas does. And that is one of the many divergences that we've seen between the parties and the primary reason that we seem to be back in a war. So,
we heard on the show on Friday that the electricity is being cut off, the food isn't getting in. With no electricity, the desalination plants aren't working, which means the water is going to be critical. I mean, where do we go from here?
Well, it looks very unlikely that the Israelis are going to stop their offensive within, we just don't know. It could go on for days, could go on for weeks. It doesn't look like Hamas are going to suddenly decide to release hostages that they're not actually beholden to under the current terms of the ceasefire that was agreed in January, unless this second phase comes in. So that will all have to be renegotiated. So we're kind of back to square one, except it's a situation where the population of Gaza is clearly very, very weak after such a long period of war. Some aid, considerable amount of aid got in during the ceasefire until the Israelis reimposed their blockade a couple of weeks ago. That aid has eased the situation somewhat. It's provided what one aid official just described to me as a bit of a safety net, but that won't last for very long. And you're looking at a very acute humanitarian crisis, certainly in parts of Gaza, beyond the obvious effects of the fighting, the airstrikes and the violence that will be very evident within days, if not certainly weeks. So, I mean, it's a pretty grim perspective. Most of the people I've spoken to in Gaza today are simply dealing with the immediate fallout of what's happened. But going forward, they all say that unless there is an end to this current round of hostilities, that some kind of ceasefire is reimposed and the blockade lifted, the entry points opened, then we're looking at where we were being back where we were in some of the worst moments of the conflict previously.
The other Arab states who brokered the peace, I'm thinking of Egypt, Jordan, and others, are they trying to reorganize fresh talks?
Well, theoretically, the indirect negotiations that have been brokered by intermediaries, primarily Arab states, as you point out, are still ongoing. I mean, there's some that's supposed to be happening in Cairo at the moment, talks with Hamas and the Egyptians, and then it will be supposedly back to Qatar, where the main focus of those talks has been. But I mean, in effect, these talks are now over for the moment. Israel has resorted to using what it says is necessary force to force Hamas to concessions. Others obviously contest that. And until this current violence, hostilities is over, I don't think any serious attempt at resuming negotiations is going to have any effect. It's pretty clear that Israel wants to reset the whole circumstances, context within which the talks are taking place, believes it has the explicit support of the US to do that. That's very important, and is likely to continue with the military attacks until Israel feels that Hamas are sufficiently weakened that they will go back to the negotiating table and force the concessions that they want to see. The problem at the moment primarily is that, which it has always been, is that Israel want Hamas to be completely destroyed, pose no further threat, and have no grip on power at all in the Gaza Strip. Hamas want a permanent, definitive end to the war and Israeli withdrawal from all the Gaza Strip, and are still there. That is the problem that's been there for months, many months, and it is not going to go away soon.
So beyond the war, beyond the Hamas and the security issues, what does the end game look like? Just say Hamas were reduced, to being totally ineffective. What are Israel offering to the Palestinian people in terms of a two-state solution? We've heard of Trump's proposal to basically relocate Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip and create it into a Riviera. I mean, what do you think are the viable end games here?
I don't think we have any idea, to be honest. There's certainly no chance of the Israelis accepting some kind of two-state solution pathway at the moment. Benjamin Netanyahu has ruled that out.
Even beyond, so say Hamas was obliterated, and it was the PLO, and it was democratic elections in Palestine. Will they accept that?
There's so many hypotheticals there that, I mean, that isn't even a discussion that's being had. All through the conflict, there have been discussions about what a day after might look like. There's been absolutely no agreement, certainly not between the Israelis and various Palestinian actors. There's been no agreement either, really, between Arab states, to an extent between Western powers. There is no consensus. And even were there to be a consensus, there's no workable plan at the moment. There is absolutely no pathway to an agreed solution. And anyway, the idea that Hamas is going to be in some way utterly eradicated, certainly by force, from the territory of Gaza is simply impracticable. So we're sadly likely to see continued rounds of violence for a long time. To be honest, for those of us who've been covering this for 18 months, and even more so for those who've been caught in it, there is very little discussion of what might be an overall overarching solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Everybody's just involved in the day-to-day tragedies of the war.
Well, an utterly grim and bleak outlook there for the Middle East and for the people of Palestine and ultimately for the people of Israel. Jason Burke, international security correspondent with The Guardian, thank you for that pretty depressing analysis.